The all is mind. The universe is mental. Okay, you with Tanisha Ali. I'm coming at y'all for the last two very, very short chapters in the Kybalion. We have finished this, and we're also going to start today the spiritual laws, the 7 spiritual laws of success by Deepak Chopra, one of my absolute favorite. But as we bring this book to an end, if you recall on the last video, we talked about the law of gender. So the last 2 chapters, chapter 14 is mental gender. It talks about the duality of mind. And then in the final chapter, chapter 15 in the Kybalion, we deal very briefly with some of the axioms in this particular masterpiece here. The all is mind, or the all is mental. The universe is mental, the all is mind. The all is mental, the universe is mind. All of that good stuff, okay? So we start on that note, and actually we end on that note. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Everything is mental. That's the whole point of this book. Everything is mental. Once you understand the 7 principles or the 7 laws, and you look at them within the context of the all being mental, then you recognize that that is where your power is. Even with the law of cause and effect, if you want to be caused, or you want to be caused, or you want to be a cause. So the all is mind and the universe is mental. Beautiful, beautiful piece of work. So we're going to quickly go through the last 2 chapters because they're very short. In this particular chapter, chapter 14, we deal with the duality of minds that you have heard spoken about, whether it's spoken about in terms of the objective and the subjective mind, the voluntary and involuntary minds, the active and the passive mind, the conscious and the subconscious. We're talking about the duality of mind, all right? So he talks about the masculine and feminine principles as they interplay within the mind space. He talks about being able to separate yourself from what is generating these thoughts to the field from which these thoughts emerge, and the active will that takes the creative energy of these thoughts and wills them into being by creating things. So it's a very interesting chapter. This is one of the chapters where you probably need to read it more than 1 or 2 times to really get the gist of it, because the way he explains it is not the easiest thing to understand. All right. But we talk about these 2 aspects of our mind separated and split into 2 distinct parts, but needing to be able to work together in order for us to be effective. He says we mostly pay attention to the masculine principle rather than the feminine principle. All right. He also makes a point of saying that but as man rises, I'm talking about on page 128, but as man rises in the scale of consciousness, he is able to disentangle his me from his idea of body and able to think of his body as belonging to the mental part of him. He's very apt to consider these internal states as identical with himself instead of there being simply things produced by some part of his mentality and existing within him. Of him and in him, but not him himself. Meaning what you hear a lot of spirituality gurus always talking about, you are not your thoughts. The thoughts, the person that looks into the mirror and says, look at me, I look cute, this is what I do for a living, blah, 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 this is what I think about that, this is my personality, this is what I'm going to wear today. That's the aspect of you that is the outward reflection, but that is not the true aspect of you. The thoughts that appear in your mind do not equate with the you. So that's important. The me, which be felt to be a something mental in which thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings, and other mental states may be produced. It is considered as the mental womb, ancients styled it, capable of generating mental offspring. So the womb, or the depth, or the space in which these things come about, or these thoughts arise. It reports to the consciousness as a me with latent powers of creation and generation of mental progeny of all sorts and kinds. Its powers of creative energy are felt to be enormous, but still it seems to be conscious that it must receive some form of energy from either its I companion or else from some other I ere it is able to bring into being its mental creation. So it has to receive an urging or an impulse from either its deeper self or from some other self, meaning as he gets into this idea of people projecting their thoughts onto other people, similar to like how an influencer may speak on YouTube, and before you know it, you have allowed that person's thoughts to enter into your mind and take shape into something tangible, which is one of the reasons why we need to be in control of our own mental energy. So then he says, I want to get into the quote where he talks about, so 130, the tendency of the mental principle, well, the two aspects of mind, the mental and the feminine principles, the I and the me, considered in connection with the well-known mental and psychic phenomena, the I being the conscious, more male principle, and the me being the receptive, more creative energy of the feminine principle. The tendency of the feminine principle is always in the direction of receiving impressions, while the tendency of the masculine principle is always in the direction of giving out or expressing. The feminine principle has a much more varied field of operation than has the masculine principle. The feminine principle conducts the work of generating new thoughts, concepts, ideas, including the work of the imagination. The masculine principle contents itself with the work of the will in its varied phases. And yet, without the active aid of the will of the masculine principle, the feminine principle is apt to rest content with generating mental images, which are the result of impressions received from outside, instead of producing original mental creations. Now, let's listen to that again. Without the active aid of the will of the masculine principle, the feminine principle is apt to rest content with generating mental images which are the result of impressions received from outside, instead of producing original mental creations. So the idea here is to produce original mental creations, all right? And if the will of the masculine is not brought into this process, then the other aspect of mind will simply recycle ideas that are not original and that are not its own. Very interesting. It's no different than with the feminine principle. We create, we germinate, we give rise to ideas, we receive. But in order for those things to take shape and go out into the world or have a result, then we have to, in an external sense, then we must imply or implore our masculine principle within. Persons who can give continued attention and thought to a subject actively employ both of the mental principles, the feminine in the work of active mental generation, and the masculine will in stimulating and energizing the creative portion of the mind. So what he's saying as well, though, is that it's up to the masculine principle to stimulate the creative feminine aspect, the creative feminine mind. The majority of persons really employ the masculine principle but little, and are content to live according to the thoughts and ideas instilled into the me from the eye of other minds. Now remember, the me is the receptive. The me is the feminine. The me is this huge thing that has this creative imagination and ability and is vast at creating its own content. But it must come through the I, is what this aspect is saying. Now, we also know that there's a part of the me that is connected to the super conscious, but I don't think we're not talking about that. So what we're saying here is that you are stimulated either by your own thinking or by the thinking outside of yourself via telepathy. In the phenomena of telepathy, it is seen how vibratory energy of the masculine principle, coming from anywhere outside of you, is projected towards the feminine principle of another person, and the later takes the seed thought and allows it to develop into maturity. The masculine principle of the person giving the suggestions directs a stream of vibratory energy or willpower towards the feminine principle of the other person, and the latter, accepting it, makes its own and acts and thinks accordingly. The idea thus lodged in the mind of another person grows and develops, and in time is regarded as the rightful mental offspring of the individual. So much is not our own. So much of what we do, how we live, what we think, what we experience is a result of something that has come outside of ourselves, taken up residence within us, that we've allowed to grow and develop into something that we begin to think is rightfully our own mental offspring. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful. The strong men and women of the world invariably manifest the masculine principle of will, and their strength depends materially upon this fact. Instead of living upon the impressions made upon their minds by others, they dominate their own minds by their will, obtaining the kind of mental images desired, and moreover dominate the minds of others, likewise in the same manner. All right, this is why the masses of people are such sheep-like creatures, never originating an idea of their own, nor using their own powers of mental activity. The trouble is that the average person dwells almost altogether in this me consciousness and does not realize that he has such a thing as an I. He is polarized in his feminine principle of mind, and the masculine principle in which is lodged the will is allowed to remain inactive and not employed. So they have to both work together. This is a pretty deep chapter. It needs more treatment, and this is the chapter that you want to read on your own more than once. Last chapter, chapter 15, the Hermetic Axioms. We're just going to quickly go through some of the highlights. All right. One, he starts out the chapter talking about the law of use is universal. What we don't use, we lose. But the possession of knowledge, unless accompanied by manifestation and expression in action, is like hoarding of the precious metals, a vain and foolish thing. Knowledge without use and expression is a vain thing, bringing no good to its possessor or to the race. Beware of mental miserliness. I like that. The next one, to change your mood or mental state, change your vibration, the Kybalion. Next, to destroy an undesirable rate of mental vibration, put into operation the principle of polarity and concentrate upon the opposite pole to that which you desire to suppress. Kill out the undesirable by changing its polarity, the Kybalion. The mastery of polarization is the mastery of the fundamental principles of mental transmutation or mental alchemy. For unless one acquires the art of changing his own polarity, he will be unable to affect his environment. Bottom line, you are powerless. You are a victim unless you can control this. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Next, to kill out a negative quality, concentrate upon the positive pole of that same quality, and the vibrations will gradually change from negative to positive until finally you will become polarized on the positive pole instead of the negative. The reverse is also true, as many have found out to their sorrow when they have allowed themselves to vibrate too constantly in the negative pole of things. Careful. Remember always, however, that you do not really destroy the principle of rhythm, for that it is indestructible. You simply overcome one law by counterbalancing it with another and thus maintain an equilibrium. This other one I like too. Nothing escapes, we're on page 141. Nothing escapes the principle of cause and effect, but there are many planes of causation, and one may use the laws of the higher to overcome the laws of the lower. By an understanding of the practice of polarization, the Hermeticists rise to a plane of causation. By rising above the plane of ordinary causes, they become themselves in a degree causes instead of being merely caused. Don't you want to become a causer instead of being caused? By being able to master their own moods and feelings, and by being able to neutralize rhythm, as we have already explained. That's where our power is, when we're swinging to the other pole, or we're in a particular phase of our development where we're not on the upside, we're on the downside, and we're able to mitigate that swing to the other side by mental transmutation. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. And last but not least, the all is mind, the universe is mental. Thank you for the enlightenment of the Kybalion. I hope you have enjoyed this journey that we've taken through the 7 principles, through all of the insight that this book has given us. It is definitely a profound add to the world of enlightenment by the 3 initiates. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And now we're getting ready to dig into the 7 laws of spiritual, the 7 spiritual laws of success. Bye. I think that's the name of it. The 7 laws of spiritual success. Yeah, I think it's the 7 laws of spiritual success. Okay.